Hi, we're back with our Ukraine updates, and where do we start? While this past week's events were not entirely unexpected, the speed of which relations between the US and Europe and Ukraine have deteriorated in line with the restoration of US-Russia relations is understandably unsettling, driven by the prospect of Ukraine being forced into a deal on unfavorable terms. From a military perspective, the conditions are not yet ripe for negotiations. Neither side is clearly losing the war, nor the war has reached a stalemate. The war continues at its usual pace, and while both sides would benefit from a ceasefire, neither is willing to compromise on its optimal outcome. Ukraine needs long-term security guarantees, whilst Russia wants to ensure Ukraine never joins NATO and remains politically neutral and, ideally, pro-Russian. And Russia can potentially already tick the box of one of those demands, as the US administration was adamant that NATO membership was not on the table. So, from the military, we move on to the diplomacy. Our thinking is that the US's confrontational approach to Europe and Ukraine is more likely to be a pressure tactic rather than a proper long-term strategy. However, the tones between Trump and Zelensky have taken an emotional rather than a pragmatic and technical twist. And by throwing the weight of the US government behind right-wing populist parties, Vice President J.D. Vance triggered one of the worst crises in transatlantic relations. European leaders agree that an increase in defense spending is necessary, and it will happen, but fiscal constraints plus the lack of clear leadership will undermine these efforts. The option of using the pot of Russian frozen funds as a last resort remains, but it is not a straightforward one. Having said this, US-Russia talks can still collapse, as evidenced by the short-lived optimism in late January that the US might have placed maximum pressure on Russia from day one. At the same time, a deal that can still benefit Ukraine is also just as plausible, with security guarantees provided by Europe, but with the US's blessing delivered in the form of increased sales of weaponry and a front seat in Ukraine's reconstruction and access to resources. We will be publishing a longer piece with more context and analysis on the Control Risks website next week, so you will hear from us very soon.